All right, hi everyone. Today we're going to take everyone through on how to write a good abstract. So if you go into Google and simply just search how to write an abstract, excuse my how to write an abstract, there should be tons of results that come up. So since I'm currently located in Australia, so I'll be speaking in the Australian context, but pretty much globally, when we, apply for different grants or when we different journal publications and reviewings and conferences, usually we follow the same format. So it's up to you really. If you're in a university at the moment, then you should be looking at your own university's websites. I'll be using the Melbourne Uni one as an example. So open up any of these introduction PDFs on how to write an abstract. You should be looking at pretty much 5 elements in total. So 5 elements include reasons for your writing. So you can also call it the context. Number 2 is why do we need to address a certain problem? Number 3 is obviously how we do it. So the methodology, and then the results or the outcome, and then the implications of how your research can contribute to the body of knowledge on the current topic. So before we dive into all of these 5 elements, let's make it very clear on what exactly is an abstract. So we've all heard this term many, many times, I believe. And then presumably the reason why you're here actually today is to look at why do we need to write one and how do we do it. So firstly, to make it very clear to everyone, abstract is a concise summary of a study, a research paper. Sometimes you might even have a short one for your essay or your thesis submissions or your conference papers. Very important for those of you who wish to pursue an academic career. You will be facing the issue of writing a research grant application. So an abstract will stay with you for a long time, starting from your thesis all the way to conference and journal publications, and then to your research grant application. So it's very important that you, sort of grasp this skill as early as you can, so that you can, make the most out of it. Okay, so once we understand what an abstract is, we now wanted to take a look at the key 5 elements and then how to write one and how to also decipher one if you ever come across an abstract that you sort of have no clue on how to read it. Okay, so with this sort of information sheet as the background, we've got 5 key elements that we're always looking for. Whoever's reviewing your abstract, they'll be looking at mostly the 5 key things as well. For example, myself, when I review anyone else's, peer review articles or peer review conference papers, I always start with the context, because your reviewer or your peers, they may not know the topic as much as you do. So when you're trying to elaborate a topic or a context, it's very important that you use a plain language so that they understand what you're writing about and why you want to write about a certain topic. So your rationale and the context of your proposed research or of your existing study. Now, there are a couple of things that we can do. Saying that, you just write this whole sentence, it's fairly easy, but how do we get started with, writing an abstract, and how do we actually sort of look for resources on how to write one? So what I usually do, which I recommend to everyone, once you sort of remember the key 5 elements, I usually recommend my students to start with looking at what other people have done in their abstract writing. So we're going to take an example here. Say that you are writing about a topic or you're studying into Chinatown. So that's my area. So that's urban area or urban studies or, architectural design, that sort of language. It's up to you. I guess, if you're writing an abstract, you should be somewhat of a, I wouldn't say expert, but familiar with your terms and familiar with your, key terminologies and key journals in your field. So you should start with, I always recommend my students to start there as well. You should start with some of the key top journals. So don't just open up a random conference that had, a bunch of abstract that's probably written by an AI. You want to start with a top journal. Okay, so in the context of 2024, it's really hard to tell who's done it with an AI or not, but we would try to, keep the academic integrity level as high as we can. So we start with a top journal first. Now, so use the key term or use your existing library of your key references of the study. You should have already got one if you're, writing a journal article or your thesis. So pick an existing article that you think it's done to a very high quality with a very high quality journal, obviously. So we're going to try and maybe use this one as an example. So we're going to show everyone how do we actually decipher an abstract. Now, an abstract is usually less than about 250 words. Given the 5 elements that we wanted to remind everyone around again, each element should take up about 50 words. So that's not a lot, okay? So you want to be concise and you want to be very articulate around your topic and around your questions. So always you find that in arts and also in, I guess, versus in science, people write their abstract in very different language terms and also very different sort of, I guess, flows of, the things that they're writing about. But that doesn't matter. So sometimes the context bit, so element 1 and 2 can change quite a bit, but the methodology, usually it's pretty obvious. What type of data they're using, what type of research method they're using. This should be very obvious in their abstract, no matter what they've done for the context part. Some people, ignore the context completely. Some people write, 10 sentences here and there, but make sure that you look out for the methodology. So that usually it's a very clear sentence. Another thing that's very clear, obviously, most of the time is the aim of the research. So the aim of the research usually appear around your element 2, so where your problem is. What's the main aim or what's the main argument of your project? And that usually sits before methodology. I guess that's very sensible, logical. You can't, elaborate on your methodology without saying what your research is trying to do. So your aim usually falls above your methodology element, and then your results and implications. Now, your results and implications might be a little bit blurry here and there, depending on the abstract again, and depending on the field. But your aim and your methodology should be very clear. Okay. So we're going to take a look at this example here. I've got 2 examples. Both are from top journals in my field. Around urban studies and architecture sort of area. Let's take a look at what people have done in their abstract. Be reminded of the 5 key elements that we're trying to find, particularly around the aim of the research and the methodology of the research. And let's see if we can identify the same elements from their written abstract. So we're going to take a look at this one here. Now, very, very straight away, sometimes students will read the abstract word by word, and it can be really confusing because you may be not very familiar with the field. So remember what I've just mentioned around finding the aim and finding your key methodology. So those should usually be very obvious. So this one straight away, I'm seeing a description around the type of data that they're using and they're gathering. This very much tells me the methodology that they're using. Okay, so this tells me, although I may not be an expert in this field, I know that they're using ethnographic data around LA area for LA Chinatown as the key case study. Okay, now we can also see that it tells you the findings straight away, but it doesn't quite tell you a implication, which is fine because people do different things. Sometimes it's because of the journal word limit around their abstract. Sometimes they may elaborate their implications in, you know, the actual article. But remember that 5 elements, remember what we said around finding the aim and finding the methodology. So your findings in this case, very, very clear, but your implications is not so much listed on this abstract here, okay? So looking back, now we got the methodology part. If we go back a sentence or back a few sentences, we can see that according to my list here, above my methodology, I should have my context / my aim. Now, once you identify that element, the 2 elements that's right above methodology becomes very clear as well. So the first sentence gives you a very broad context of what this paper or what this article is trying to do, in what type of area, what type of field, and then why they wanted to do such a research, okay? And then they will give you a more narrowed down scope, okay? So this one, it's one example, and we're going to take a look at another example, still using the key term Chinatown from my search. Now, this one here, it's very interesting because I would say that this abstract followed the journal's requirements. So because the abstract straight away starts with what the paper has done, instead of saying the context or instead of saying, you know, the scope of the study, okay? So this one straight away says that we're examining the key urban characters of Chinatown around the world, okay? Now, so let's take a look at the further sentences and see if we can identify the methods as well as the findings. Now, okay, this straight away, it says it employs a methodology that combines space syntax analysis of street networks, morphological analysis of built form, land use analysis and mapping of visual character from street level. So this one here tells me straight away that what the methodology is, what type of, you know, data that they're using, what analysis that they've done. Although you may not be familiar with the field, you may not be familiar with what's, you know, methods within that field, it's still very clear that the methodology that's engaged in this study. Now, we can also see after methodology, just remind yourself with the key things that's included in an abstract. After your methodology, you've got results and implications. Let's come back to you and see if that's, you know, elaborated here. It may not be the same order here and there. For example, I'm seeing that it says this paper develops new insights into how la di la. That sounds a bit of like an implication / finding for me. And also says at the very last sentence, finding develop a new taxonomy of Chinatowns based on their urban spatial character. So that sounds like finding / implication to me. So what you can see from our short exercise today is use your university website effectively. I'm using the one from Melbourne Uni. You can use, you know, any ones that you're currently have with you. You can also search for different universities' guidelines and see what they've recommended for how to write an abstract. Now, this is a generic overview of how to write an abstract and what are the key elements of an abstract. Based on the review of today, you should also know that when you're writing your own abstract, these are the key elements that you want to include. And you want to use a plain language that sort of highlights what you're doing, make it easy for the peer reviewers and also for your supervisors, whoever's reading your abstract. You want to make it very clear to them. For example, I might start with my sentence, for example, something around incorporating a certain method. So that sounds to me, this next sentence, I will be speaking about my methodology. The findings of the research, obviously that's my results / findings. The outcome of my research contribute to la di la, so that's very clearly implications. Now, sometimes people would also include a limitation of their research in their abstract. People do that in different fields. For example, in my field, in architecture / urban planning, designing area, people do that. Okay. I'm not entirely sure with how arts people do their abstract, but certainly in the built environment field, people do sometimes elaborate on one sentence of the limitation of the research. Now, once you know that, I think the rest is really, looking at different abstract and sort of learning as you go. Okay, so we're going to use another journal as an example to finish off today. This will be a good journal for those of you who, might not be very familiar with how to write one or still are quite confused. So sometimes journals will provide you with a template of an abstract. For example, in this one here, this journal gives you an abstract of a breakdown that includes a purpose, so context, why, rationale, all that goes into purpose, methodology, design, approach. So that basically is what you've done, how you've done it. So methodology, methods you used, data types, all goes into there. And then moving on to findings, results, and then implications. Okay, so sometimes journals will give you a breakdown of what they're asking for. When you open up this journal in particular, every single paper would have the same format of the abstract, but it doesn't deviate that far from what we've seen from, for example, some of the university examples that we've listed at the start of the video. Okay. All right, so now I hope you've enjoyed today's short tutorial on how to write an abstract and where to find useful resources and how to get started with reading and interpreting others' abstracts. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.